It was supposed to be just business, until he pulled her close and whispered what he wanted. It was supposed to be just business. That was the sentence Alina Brooks repeated to herself as she stepped into the elevator, clutching a leather portfolio that held the last hope of her career. The doors slid shut with a soft click, sealing her inside a glass box that rose steadily toward the top floors toward him. Just business. A contract, temporary, nothing personal. She exhaled slowly, steadying her pulse as the elevator climbed. 27 floors, 27 chances to turn back. She didn't. When the doors opened, the silence hit first. The executive floor was immaculate, polished stone, muted lighting, the kind of quiet that came from power, not peace. Every step echoed like a reminder that this was not her territory. The assistant barely looked up. "He's expecting you." Of course he was. Alina straightened her spine and followed her into the office. And that was when she saw Julian Cross. He stood near the window, back to her, hands clasped behind him as the city stretched endlessly below. He was tall, sharply dressed, composed in a way that suggested he never rushed, never needed to. "Ms. Brooks," he said without turning, "you're on time." She raised an eyebrow. That's usually the minimum expectation. That earned her a glance. Julian turned slowly, dark eyes assessing her with a precision that made her feel exposed without being diminished. He wasn't handsome in an obvious way. He was controlled, contained, like someone who never wasted energy on charm. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. She did, refusing to fidget. He slid a thin folder toward her. "Your reputation precedes you." Alina opened it, skimming quickly. "Your problem does too." A flicker of interest crossed his face. "You've been brought in because this merger is bleeding credibility," he said. "I don't need reassurance. I need results." She looked up. "And you think I can give them to you?" "I know you can," he replied, "if you're willing to commit fully." There it was, the unspoken cost. "What does fully mean?" she asked. Julian leaned back slightly, fingers steepled. "Access. Long hours, travel, absolute discretion." "In boundaries," she countered, his gaze sharpened. "What kind?" "Professional ones," she said calmly. "No personal expectations, no blurred lines, no assumptions." For a moment he said nothing, then he nodded once. "Agreed." The word felt heavier than it should have. "This is a temporary engagement," he continued. 6 weeks, you advise. I decide when it ends cleanly." Alina closed the folder. "And if I disagree with you, then you convince me," he said, "or you walk away." She smiled faintly. "That's refreshingly honest." Julian stood, signaling the meeting was over. As she rose, he stepped closer, not deliberately, not aggressively, but enough that she became acutely aware of his presence. "This stays business," he said quietly. She met his gaze without blinking. "Of course." But something in the air shifted. A fraction of tension, a moment of awareness. He noticed it too, because he took a step back. As Alina left the office, her pulse raced, not from nerves but from the unsettling realization that restraint had already entered the room. And somewhere behind her, Julian Cross stood alone in his office, staring at the closed door, thinking the same thing neither of them were ready to admit yet. This was not going to stay just business. Alina learned quickly that working with Julian Cross meant living inside pressure. There were no leisurely mornings. No idle meetings, no wasted words. The days unfolded in tightly scheduled blocks, conference calls that bled into strategy sessions, red-line documents passed back and forth until the margins disappeared. She was given an office just outside his, glass walls, no blinds, visibility without intimacy. It felt intentional. Julian didn't hover, he didn't micromanage, he simply expected excellence and noticed immediately when it appeared. "You caught the discrepancy before legal did," he said one evening, scanning a report she'd revised. "That saved us a week. That's what you hired me for." "Yes," he agreed. "But most people don't deliver under this kind of pressure." She shrugged. "Most people don't get quiet enough to think." That earned her a long look. After that, he started calling her in earlier, not to give instructions but to ask questions. What happens if we delay the announcement? Who benefits from this leak? Say it again, but assume the board is hostile. He listened when she answered, really listened. It unsettled her more than dismissal ever could have. The late nights became routine, the building emptied, the city lights flickered on beyond the windows. Somewhere between midnight coffee and shared exhaustion, proximity crept in. Not flirtation, not romance. Awareness. Julian would stand too close while reviewing a screen. Alina would feel the subtle heat of him beside her and deliberately not step away. Not because she wanted to cross a line, but because she refused to be the one who flinched. Once when she reached for a file at the same time he did, their fingers brushed. Just once. The contact was brief, accidental, both of them stilled. Julian withdrew first. "Apologies," he said evenly. "It's fine," she replied, just as controlled, but the air had changed. The first sign that Julian was protecting her came during a board call. One of the directors interrupted her mid-sentence. Julian didn't raise his voice, he didn't scold, he simply said, "Let her finish." The silence that followed was immediate. Alina glanced at him, surprised. He didn't look back. After the call, she spoke carefully. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes," he said, "I did." "Why?" "Because you were right," he replied, "and because no one interrupts my strategist." Something in his tone made her chest tighten, not ownership, respect. She began to notice things, how Julian never sat with his back to a door, how he read people faster than numbers, how control wasn't arrogance for him, it was survival, and she wondered what had taught him that. One night, as rain streaked down the windows and the city below blurred into light, she finally asked. "You don't trust easily," she said. He didn't look up from the screen. "Neither do you." "That's not an answer, it's the only one you're getting." She smiled faintly. Fair. The almost moment came without warning. They were standing at the conference table, tension thick in the air after a brutal negotiation call. Alina leaned back against the table, exhaling sharply. "If they push again tomorrow, we walk," she said. "They're bluffing." Julian stepped closer. "You're certain?" Yes, he studied her face too closely. For a second, neither of them moved. The room felt smaller. Julian lifted his hand, then stopped himself, lowered it. "This is why lines exist," he said quietly. She swallowed. "Because they're easy to cross?" "Because once crossed," he replied, "they don't uncross cleanly." Silence stretched between them, then his phone rang. The moment shattered. He stepped back instantly, all composure restored. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow will be worse." As Alina gathered her things, her pulse raced, not with anticipation but with something heavier. Because restraint, she realized, was becoming louder than desire. And she wasn't sure how long either of them could keep pretending they didn't hear it. The crisis arrived the way they always did, quietly, then all at once. Alina was halfway through her second coffee when Julian walked into her office without knocking. His expression was composed, but his eyes were sharp with urgency. "We have a problem," he said. She was already standing. "Tell me." "A leak," he replied. "Selective, damaging, timed perfectly to undermine the board vote tomorrow." Alina grabbed her tablet, skimming the headlines as they populated in real time. Her jaw tightened. "This isn't panic journalism," she said. "This is strategy." Julian nodded. "And it puts us in a corner." They moved into the conference room together, the glass walls offering no privacy but plenty of pressure. Alina paced, thinking aloud, her mind working fast. "If you respond publicly, you validate the narrative," she said. "If you stay silent, they control the story." Julian leaned against the table, arms crossed. "So what's the third option?" She stopped pacing. "You step back," she said slowly, just long enough to let them overplay their hand. His eyes narrowed. "And who takes point?" Alina met his gaze. "I do." The word hung between them. "No," Julian said immediately. "This is my role," she countered. "You hired me to absorb pressure so you don't have to." You didn't sign up to be collateral, he snapped. She took a step closer. I signed up to do the job. The tension spiked sharp and sudden. Julian straightened, closing the distance without touching her. You don't understand what this kind of exposure costs. I understand exactly what it costs, she said quietly. I've paid it before. Something in her voice made him still. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed again. Another alert, another article. The room felt too small. Elena exhaled. We're running out of time. Julian turned away, jaw tight, hands braced on the table as if he were physically holding himself back. This was supposed to be business, he said under his breath. She didn't mean to answer, but she did. Then why does it feel like more? He turned. The silence between them stretched, heavy with everything they'd avoided saying. Julian took one step closer, then another. Elena's back met the edge of the table. She didn't move away. His voice dropped, controlled, restrained, dangerous in its honesty. Because I'm failing at pretending you don't matter, he said, her breath caught. You can't say that, she whispered. I know. He reached out not to touch her but to brace his hand against the table beside her, trapping space, not her. For weeks I've done everything right, he continued. I kept the rules, I held the line, I told myself proximity was harmless. His gaze flicked to her lips, then back to her eyes, and I was wrong. Elena's pulse roared in her ears. Julian, he leaned in, stopping just short of contact, his mouth close enough that she felt his breath against her cheek. I want you, he whispered, not loudly. Not claimed, admitted, the words sent a shock straight through her. I want you, he repeated, voice rough now, not because you're here, not because I hired you, but because you challenge me and because I don't know how to stop thinking about you. Her hands clenched at her sides. Say something, he murmured. She swallowed. You're my employer. I know, he said, and that's why this ends here. He pulled back abruptly, stepping away as if distance were the only thing keeping him intact. That was a mistake, he said flatly. No, Elena replied, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. That was the truth. He didn't argue. He picked up his jacket, composure snapping back into place like armor. We finished the job, he said, then this arrangement ends. Her chest tightened. You're pushing me away. I'm protecting us both, she nodded slowly. Then I'll do what I was hired to do. She gathered her tablet and walked toward the door. Elena, Julian said quietly. She paused. What I whispered, he continued, wasn't impulse. She met his gaze. It was clarity. She left the room without looking back, her heart pounding, not with fear but with certainty, because whatever they'd crossed in that moment, there was no pretending anymore. This wasn't just business, and both of them knew it. The distance hit harder than the whisper ever had. Elena felt it the next morning, how Julian no longer stepped into her office without warning, how his emails were shorter, cleaner, stripped of nuance. He was polite, professional, impeccably controlled, and entirely absent. They worked efficiently, successfully. The strategy unfolded exactly as planned. The board stabilized, the crisis cooled. On paper, everything was perfect. Inside, Elena felt like she was standing in the aftermath of something unfinished. She told herself this was the correct outcome, the safe one. She had known from the beginning that this was temporary, that mixing anything personal with power was a risk she couldn't afford. So why did it feel like something vital was being slowly withdrawn? The answer arrived 3 days later in the form of a meeting request. Julian Cross, private, no agenda. Her pulse spiked despite herself. Julian was standing by the window again when she entered his office, the city washed in gray behind him. He didn't turn right away. The board vote is tomorrow, he said. If it passes, the merger is finalized. Yes, she replied, and it will pass. He nodded. Because of you, she waited. I've asked legal to terminate your contract at the end of the week, he continued calmly, with full compensation and a recommendation. Her chest tightened. You're ending it early. I should have done it sooner, he said. She crossed her arms. Because you don't trust yourself. He turned then. Because I don't trust the power imbalance, he said evenly, and because I won't let what I want put you in a position where saying no becomes complicated. The words were measured, they still hurt. You don't get to decide that for me, she said quietly. I know, he replied. That's why I'm removing myself from the equation. Silence stretched between them. So this is it, she said. We fix everything and then I disappear. No, he said immediately. You move forward, and you, she asked. He didn't answer. That told her everything. Alina packed her office that evening with steady hands. She didn't cry, she didn't rage. She had learned long ago how to leave places without ceremony. As she stepped into the elevator for the last time, she felt the weight of finality settle in her chest. This was the cost of choosing dignity. The board vote passed the next morning. Applause, handshakes, congratulatory messages. Julian accepted them all with practiced composure and felt none of it. The success tasted hollow. That night he stood alone in his office long after everyone else had gone, replaying the moment in the conference room over and over again, not the whisper, the restraint after. For the first time he admitted the truth he'd been avoiding. Letting her walk away hadn't protected him, it had exposed him. Alina was halfway through a quiet dinner at home when her phone rang. Julian, she stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. Julian, she said carefully. I made a mistake, he said, her heart skipped. You'll have to be more specific. I chose control over honesty, he continued, and I don't want to do that anymore. She closed her eyes. That doesn't change the reality. No, he agreed, but it changes my choice. She hesitated. What are you saying? I'm stepping back from the operational role, he said. Effective immediately, the board will appoint an interim lead. Her breath caught. You're serious? I am, he replied. And I'm calling because if there's any chance, any at all, that what I whispered didn't end there, I need to ask, not assume. Silence stretched, heavy and fragile. You're not my employer anymore, he added quietly. So this time the decision is entirely yours. Alina's chest tightened not with fear but with clarity. I won't be chosen out of guilt, she said, or regret. I know, Julian replied. I'm asking to be chosen freely. She looked around her apartment, small, quiet, hers, then she said, meet me somewhere neutral, no offices, no power. Anywhere, he said, name it. She gave him an address. After the call ended, Alina sat back, heart racing. For the first time since the whisper, the story was no longer about restraint, it was about choice. And whatever happened next would be real, because neither of them had anything left to hide. They met at a place that belonged to neither of them. A small cafe tucked between a bookstore and a florist, warm, unpolished, quietly alive. No glass walls, no assistants. No unspoken hierarchy humming beneath the air. Julian was already there when Alina arrived, not in a suit. That alone stopped her. He stood when he saw her, hesitation clear in the way he moved, as if he wasn't sure he had the right anymore. Thank you for coming, he said. Thank you for not choosing somewhere expensive, she replied, a corner of his mouth lifted. I'm learning. They sat. For a moment neither spoke. It wasn't awkward, it was careful, two people standing on ground that hadn't existed before. I meant what I said on the phone, Julian began. I stepped back not for you but because I don't want to build anything that requires silence to survive. She studied his face, looking for cracks, excuses, found none. And what do you want now? She asked. He didn't answer right away. I want to know you, he said finally, without contracts, without leverage, without pretending I don't feel what I feel. Her breath caught. And if I say no, then I respect it, he replied. And I'm grateful you didn't let me keep lying to myself. The honesty settled something inside her. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, grounding herself. I won't be hidden, she said, and I won't be an almost. I don't want almost, he said quietly. I want deliberate. Silence stretched, then eased. Alina smiled faintly. You're terrible at this. Yes, he admitted, but I'm sincere. That did it. They didn't rush. They talked for hours about work that didn't define them, about fear disguised as control, about what it meant to choose someone without needing them. When they finally stood to leave, it felt steady. Outside, the city breathed around them. Julian stopped, hands in his pockets, searching her face. "May I?" She stepped closer instead of answering. This time, when he pulled her close, there was no urgency, no claim, just warmth present chosen, and when he whispered now, it wasn't what he wanted. It was what he was offering. "I'm here," he said, "if you want me." She rested her forehead against his chest, heart calm for the first time in weeks. "I do," she said, "as long as we keep choosing." He smiled, soft, unguarded, always. And for the first time since they'd met, the truth settled easily between them. It had started as just business. It became something far more dangerous, something mutual, something real.